Joe Webster felt that running for governor was the highest point of his professional journey, and he was excited that he could finally have a greater influence in his state. His wife, Vicky, was his biggest supporter, and she worked tirelessly as his campaign manager. But Joe's first attempt at running for governor wasn't successful. He decided to take a break and reflect on his next steps. Despite the setback, Joe was determined to keep pursuing his dream, and he knew that with Vicky by his side, anything was possible. She was a real treasure. The couple decided to visit Joe's family back home. They packed their bags, got into their car, and drove for hours until they reached Joe's hometown. Joe felt happy to be back in his old stomping grounds, and Vicky was excited to meet Joe's family for the second time since their marriage. As Joe settled into his childhood room and looked around, he felt a rush of nostalgia. The room was just as he remembered it, with the same posters on the walls and the same creaky bed. As he rummaged through his old belongings, he stumbled upon a box of photographs. As he flipped through the pictures, memories of his youth flooded back to him. But then he came across a particular photo that made his heart skip a beat. It was a picture of him and his high school sweetheart, Kate. The two of them were beaming with happiness, their arms wrapped around each other's waist. Joe felt a mix of emotions as he looked at the photo. He hadn't thought about Kate in years, and he wondered what had become of her. "Old memories?" Vicky quietly said from behind. Joe didn't notice her coming in. "Oof, you scared me, baby," Joe replied. He was shaking a little. "Honey, are you alright?" Vicky asked and looked at the photo in his hands. "Oh no, I'm fine. I was just looking at some old stuff here," Joe replied, afraid if Vicky would ask him about the photo. Vicky didn't say anything, but her expression implied that she was expecting Joe to say something. "Look, honey, I was just rummaging through some old photos and I found this one. It's Kate, we used to date back in high school," Joe explained. He was still nervous. "Hey, it's alright. Why are you nervous?" Vicky asked. "Oh, I thought you were jealous or something. I mean, this is from a long time ago. I just happen to still have it," Joe explained. "Assuming much?" Vicky raised her eyebrow. Then she quickly added, "Relax, honey. I'm kidding. You can keep the photo. I was just teasing you," she smiled. Joe smiled, feeling relieved. But Vicky still had the lingering feeling that something was off. Joe grew up in a family that owned a small movie theater in town. He would often sneak into the theater after hours and watch his favorite movies on the big screen. As he grew older, he started working at the theater, selling tickets and popcorn to customers. One day, a young girl came into the movie theater, and Joe noticed that she didn't have any money to buy a ticket. He felt sorry for her and decided to let her in for free. Her name was Kate, and surprisingly, she told him that she had never been in movies. She told Joe that she dreamed of owning a movie theater one day so that she could watch movies every day for free. Over the next few weeks, Kate started coming to the theater more often, and Joe would always let her in for free. She would sit in the back row and watch the movies with rapt attention. As Kate continued to visit the movie theater, she and Joe started talking more and more. They discovered that they had a lot in common and enjoyed each other's company. Soon, they started going out on dates and getting to know each other better. They dated for a couple of years. However, as Joe's high school years drew to a close, he knew that he had to move on to college. He was excited to further his education and pursue new opportunities, but he was also sad to leave Kate behind. Joe's transition to college was a big change for him, and he found himself struggling to balance his studies, new friendships, and a long-distance relationship. He began to feel overwhelmed and stretched too thin. He started to respond less frequently to her letters and phone calls, and became more and more distant. Kate felt confused and hurt by Joe's sudden change in behavior. She didn't understand why he couldn't make time for her, and she missed him terribly. She kept calling and writing to him, hoping to get through to him and rekindle their relationship. However, Joe remained unresponsive and distant. One day, after weeks of unanswered calls and letters, Joe finally answered Kate's call. He explained that he was struggling with the demands of college and that he didn't feel like he could give her the attention and support she deserved. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice shaking with emotions. "I would have been there for you. I would have supported you through it all." "I know," Joe replied, his own voice heavy with regret. "But I was ashamed. I didn't want you to see me struggling like this." Kate's heart broke even more at his words. "Joe, I love you for who you are, not just for what you can give me. I want to be there for you, to help you through the tough times. Please don't shut me out." "I'm sorry, Kate," Joe said, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just need some time to figure things out. I hope you can understand." Kate sighed deeply, wiping away her tears. "I do understand, Joe, but it doesn't make it any easier. I'll give you the time you need, but please don't forget about me. I love you." "I won't forget about you, Kate," Joe said and hung up the phone. As it turned out, there was more to Joe's sudden distance from Kate than just the pressures of college. Joe had met someone else, a fellow student named Vicky, and he had started to develop feelings for her. Vicky was smart and funny. Joe found himself drawn to her creative energy and passion for life. He began to see her as more than just a friend. He was excited by the possibilities of a new relationship, but he also felt guilty about what it might mean for his relationship with Kate. He didn't want to hurt her, but he also didn't know how to tell her the truth about his feelings for Vicky. Instead, he made excuses and avoided her calls and letters, hoping that she would eventually get the message and move on. One day, Kate couldn't take it anymore and visited Joe in college. She was excited to see him again, hoping that they could reconnect and rebuild their relationship, but she saw him with Vicky. It was a difficult experience for her. Kate didn't want to cause a scene or make things awkward for Vicky. Despite her disappointment, Kate knew that Vicky had nothing to do with Joe's past, and she didn't want to judge her based on his actions, so she kept her distance and tried to stay out of their way. When Joe was alone, Kate approached him. "Hello, Joe." Joe was caught off guard. "What are you doing here?" "Not even a hello for the old time's sake?" Kate asked. Hi, hello, Kate. Hey, listen, I'm so sorry, but it's over. My girlfriend will be here soon. I'm really sorry it didn't work out." Joe turned around and quickly walked inside the building. Kate's heart was shattered. As she drove away, she couldn't help but feel hurt and abandoned. Abandoned by her mother, and now abandoned by someone who was so close to her heart. Kate came from a poor family, and growing up was tough. Her father drove an old truck, and he did his best to provide for her, but they often struggled to make ends meet. The fact that her mother had left them for another man, a wealthy one at that, only added to the pain. Kate often wondered what life would have been like if her mother had stayed, if they had more money, if she had been able to go to college. But now, all of those thoughts were eclipsed by the heartbreak she felt from losing Joe. She wiped away her tears and tried to focus on moving forward, but it wasn't easy. After their graduation, Joe and Vicky decided to start a newspaper in the city. The newspaper quickly gained popularity, and Joe became a well-known figure among politicians and other influential people. Joe's hard work and dedication paid off, and he began to receive invitations to high-profile events and dinners where he could meet and mingle with other powerful people in the community. It seemed like everything was going according to plan for Joe and Vicky, and they were well on their way to achieving their dreams. They had been together for several years before Joe proposed. They had built a successful career together and had grown to love each other deeply. Joe was grateful to have Vicky by his side and knew that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with her. They had a beautiful wedding with their family and friends in attendance. Vicky looked stunning in her white dress. 10 years after founding their newspaper, Joe decided to run for governor. Vicky was very supportive and helped with the campaign. Unfortunately, the first attempt was not successful, as Joe didn't receive enough votes to win. Despite this setback, Joe and Vicky didn't give up. Feeling a sense of responsibility towards his family, Joe decided to put his political ambitions on hold and help his father with the family business. They brainstormed ideas on how to compete with the new multiplex that was being built a few blocks away from their movie theater. They renovated the old family theater, adding comfortable seats and installing a state-of-the-art sound system. Joe and Vicky were out shopping for groceries to prepare for a family dinner. Vicky picked up a newspaper and started reading about Joe's campaign. Meanwhile, Joe was browsing the aisles when he suddenly bumped into a stunning young woman. It didn't take long for him to realize that it was Kate. They looked at each other in shock and disbelief, but before they could say anything, Vicky arrived. Joe turned to look at her, and when he looked back at Kate, she had already disappeared. The encounter left Joe feeling uneasy and conflicted. That's weird. That woman you bumped into at the store? Why do I feel like I've seen her somewhere? Just can't remember where. And she looked at you strangely too, Vicky said as they were driving back home. She did? I don't know. She must have confused me with someone else, Joe replied, but in his mind the image of the perfect Kate was stuck. Joe drove Vicky back to his parents' house. He told her he needed to drop by his friend Peter's place. When he got there, he sat in the car for a few minutes, thinking about what had just happened at the grocery store. He couldn't believe he had run into Kate after all these years, and he couldn't shake off the feeling that he needed to talk to her. Joe and Peter met at a coffee shop where Joe asked if Peter knew anything about Kate. Peter only knew that she disappeared when Joe left for college and reappeared last year. There were rumors that she bought the old house she lived in with her father and built a new one there. Joe drove to the place where Kate used to live in a small trailer with her father. However, instead of the old worn-down trailer, there was now a grand mansion in its place. He parked his car nearby and watched the house from a distance. After about 30 minutes of waiting and observing, he saw Kate walk out onto the second floor balcony, looking lively and graceful. She was dressed in a gown and a swimsuit. As Joe watched Kate from his car, he couldn't help but feel a sense of nostalgia. He remembered the times they spent together as teenagers before he had even met Vicky. As he continued to watch her, he noticed that Kate seemed to be living a completely different life now. She looked elegant and sophisticated, as if she belonged in a different world. He wondered what had happened to her after he left for college. He couldn't believe that she had managed to build such a magnificent house in such a short time. Joe's mind was racing with questions. Where did Kate disappear after they broke up? How did she manage to become so successful? Did she ever think of him during all those years? He decided to take a chance and drive up to the house. As he parked his car in front of the gate, he felt a surge of nervousness. What would he say to Kate after all these years? Would she even remember him? Joe mustered up his courage and pressed the intercom button. After a few seconds, a voice crackled through the speaker. "Who is it?" "It's Joe," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. There was a pause, and then the gate slowly opened. Joe drove up the long driveway, taking in the sight of the mansion's grandeur. He parked his car and got out, walking up to the front door. Kate opened the door and greeted him with her piercing gaze and a warm smile. "Hi, Joe. It's been a long time. What brings you here?" Joe couldn't help but feel a little tongue-tied in her presence. I was just passing by and I saw your house. I had to stop and say hello." "That's so nice of you, Joe," Kate replied. "You look great," Joe said. "Thank you. You look great too." After an awkward moment of silence, Joe said, I'm really happy to see you. Looks like you're doing great." "I am. You're probably wondering how. I'm really sorry for everything." "It's okay, Joe. Actually, in a weird way, you leaving me was the best thing that ever happened to me." Kate told Joe about her journey. After their last encounter, she decided to travel to different places in search of happiness. It was during her travels that fate intervened and led her to her mother. When they met, her mother was contrite and apologetic. She acknowledged her mistakes and asked for forgiveness. She gave her a large sum of money that Kate could use to pursue her dreams. She insisted that it was a gesture of love and not a way to buy her forgiveness. Kate accepted the money, and with it, she was able to start her own business. As the night wore on, Joe said his goodbyes and hurried home. During dinner, Joe's dad mentioned the new multiplex in town and how it was threatening the survival of their family-owned movie theater. Suddenly, it all clicked for Joe. He realized that the rich guy his dad was referring to was none other than Kate. As they were getting ready to sleep, Joe started feeling guilty for not telling Vicky about his past with Kate. He knew he had to come clean and tell her everything. So he took a deep breath and shared with her everything that had happened between him and Kate. Vicky was surprised and asked him why he never told her about it before. Joe explained that it was a long time ago and he didn't think it was relevant to their present life. He also told Vicky that it was her he ran into at the grocery store and that she had built a massive mansion and a multiplex. Vicky listened patiently and asked him if he still had feelings for her. Joe said no, but he couldn't help feeling guilty for how he treated her in the past. Vicky comforted him and reminded him that everyone has a past. She encouraged him to let go of his guilt and focus on the campaign. Next day, Vicky went to meet Kate face to face. She knew that she had to do everything in her power to protect Joe's family movie business. She decided to try to persuade Kate to come up with a compromise. When Vicky showed up at her door, Kate was surprised. Vicky was the least expected visitor for her. Throughout the conversation, Kate was surprised by Vicky's maturity and understanding, and she realized that she had misjudged her. Kate promised to find a way to cooperate. At some point, Kate even promised to sponsor Joe's next campaign. Vicky was taken aback by this gesture. She was so grateful nonetheless. From that day on, Kate and Vicky became good friends. When Joe heard about the conversation Vicky had with Kate, he was taken aback by how well Vicky handled the situation. He felt grateful and blessed to have Vicky in his life and thanked her for being an amazing wife who handled everything so maturely. Joe felt ashamed of his past mistakes and realized the value of having a supportive and understanding partner like Vicky in his life. One day, Kate visited Joe's parents and they had dinner together. She had decided to merge their movie theater businesses and split the profits equally. It was a great idea because it was actually in Joe's parents' theater where Kate first developed her love for movies. I don't know if Joe had ever told you, but I have never paid for a ticket in your movie theater, Kate said, and everyone laughed. Joe eventually became a governor. He sat in his office reflecting on his journey. He felt a sense of contentment and gratitude for how things had turned out for him.